All right, welcome back to week 2. In this video, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about reader response criticism. Want to be very clear from the get-go that reader response is not just your opinion. A lot of students, for a number of reasons, approach reader response as though any reading, any form of analysis is fine as long as that's just you, as long as you own it. And that is not reader response criticism. That's just your opinion. It's not a school of criticism, and it's not a form of analysis. Your opinion, while valid to you and maybe to the people that you know, is not sufficient in terms of scholarly or academic forms of analysis, period. So, what is reader response? There are a couple of ways for us to come at reader response. One of those, and I think this is probably the best and most accessible way to understand reader response, is when you as a reader, and again, when we are talking about text and readers, you can be a reader of any text, whether that is an advertisement in a magazine or a TV show. Text can be a shoe, it can be a hairstyle. A text can be a book, it can be a play, it can be a movie, it can be a show. A text is anything that is observable, and you as the reader of a text just really means that you are observing whatever your chosen text is. So, reader response is when you are consciously making a decision to alter the text in some way. In its best form, you are a co-creator of meaning, and I certainly think that our field of study, based off of what we've read very early on in the book of Genesis, what we see as God as a character is inviting humans into this act of co-creation, into naming, into understanding, into ordering, also into creating new forms of themselves and doing new things. So I think that definitely co-creation, there is grounds for us to say that if you are co-creating in some capacity, if you are an artist in some capacity, if you are doing anything and producing anything, you are co-creating with this character in light of the Hebrew Scriptures. In terms of reading a text, when you are co-creating and co-reading a text, what this can mean is that you are creating alternative narratives as you are going along. And one example that I use a lot in my romance novel class, not romantic literature like the Romantic period, but romance novels like trash novels, the things that you probably have on your tablets that you don't want people to catch you reading. Those kinds of stories, you can be a co-creator of meaning as simple as adjusting how a character looks. I am aware that I make decisions as I'm reading to alter the appearance of some of the characters. And a good example of this, again, in my romance novel class, is the book Jane Eyre. Because historically, Jane Eyre, as a character inside of the novel, also of the same name, Jane Eyre is depicted as having brown hair, brown eyes, and her brown hair she describes as being curly. And so it is becoming new in the field of literary studies for people to revisit that story and to acknowledge that it is possible that Jane is a black character. Just because you have brown hair and brown eyes doesn't make you white. I think most of us, if we saw the description of someone on the page, knowing nothing else about a story or about this person, if we saw someone who was being described as having dark skin, dark hair, dark eyes, you would probably think that they're black. And for some reason, historically, Jane Eyre has been understood as a white woman who, in different miniseries translations on television, has been translated as a white woman who has blonde hair. These are editorial decisions that people have made to adjust what her appearance is. When the book itself, when the story itself says that she is darker hair, darker complexion, dark curly hair, and brown eyes, I think most of us, again, would probably look at that description and say, clearly this is a woman of color. And yet, historically, that has not been how the character has been depicted in movies or in television. And so I think that, again, like, we do this all the time. Whenever we read a story, we will change the color of someone's clothes, we will change the color of someone's hair, their eye color, into what we prefer, into what is more appropriate to how we understand the character. If you're reading through a fantasy novel, a character can become even more evil as you are reading along because you are co-constructing and co-creating how that character looks. Now, again, this is something remarkably different from I liked this movie or I didn't like this movie and just stopping right there. You can kind of see pretty straight away that these are not the same skill sets at all. You're not doing the same thing at all. And yet students will consistently use reader response criticism to say, this is a good novel or this is a good story because I think it is. And it's like, I read that and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, not only are you not understanding the theory or the school of criticism, you're not even analyzing. You're not doing analysis at all. You're just saying what your opinion is. Another form of reader response criticism is when you are putting skin in the game, when you are sharing and discussing and dissecting about yourself and using that as a door to open up that school of criticism. Again, reader response criticism. And so when we get into something like the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel, if you are like me and you grew up in a religious environment, you will often kind of have ministers who will gloss over Ezekiel as a book of the Bible entirely because it's so remarkably strange. I mean, Ezekiel has visions of a great city coming down from the sky, and God is establishing this city and has it walled off. Ezekiel also sees wheels within wheels, and so if you think about the depiction of that, of wheels within wheels that are circling one another in the sky, most of us would see a wheel within a wheel inside, or a wheel within a wheel in the sky. Most of us would say, well, that's a flying saucer. It's just a very strange book. What I have found in my own studies, in my own research, is that Ezekiel is very much a book of trauma. We start off this book by Ezekiel saying that he has lost everything. He has lost his wife. He's had to lose his role in the community as a member of the temple. He has seen the destruction of the temple. He's seen the destruction of his entire city. He has seen the death of his wife, the death of his neighbors and his friends, and presumably other family members. This is someone who has lost everything. Everything. This is someone who, if we looked at him as a person sitting across the table in front of us, we would say this is an individual that has a lot of trauma, that is carrying a lot of trauma. Now, apart from psychoanalysis, apart from trying to understand that, we don't have to be qualified in terms of psychoanalysis or counseling or the therapeutic services to understand that, again, this is someone who has experienced a great deal of trauma. Again, another layer to this is that I, as someone who has experienced trauma, I read the book of Ezekiel remarkably different from, wow, that's a weird book. I don't know what to do with that, and passing on. I read the book of Ezekiel and I'm like, bruh, I totally get it. Like, I get where you are coming from. I read Ezekiel in a particular way as someone who has also been through trauma. I read it in light of that. Now, to say that, I have to put skin in the game. I have to acknowledge my own ways of reading. I have to acknowledge my own trauma. This is not the same thing as me reading the book of Ezekiel and going, wow, that guy seems really messed up. He must have experienced a lot of trauma. That's just my opinion. No, this is me putting skin in the game by saying I, as someone who have experienced trauma, can recognize another individual who has also been through trauma. I can be sympathetic to that story because of that, because that's something that I've experienced, and acknowledging that, and again, putting that personal experience into the story and reading it in that way and acknowledging that that is how I read it, that is reader response. Again, really have to stress this. Reader response is not your opinion. Reader response is you acknowledging intentionally the ways that you are co-creating meaning of the story, and it can also mean at times ways in which you are informed and sympathetic to what is happening in the story because you have been through that. Turning into yet another example, there are some movies that I just cannot watch. There are some TV shows that I cannot watch because, as someone who experienced abuse as a child, I just can't do it. My brain goes into another place. My wife says that there are shows or documentaries that we've watched where, and I genuinely don't even recognize that I'm doing it. It's like something shuts down in my brain and I just walk out of the room. There are other times when I'm able to acknowledge that that is why I'm doing that. Again, these are situations where something is being tripped, something is being triggered, something it just does not compute what is happening inside the story. And so I think another way that we can acknowledge reader response is not when we are co-creating, but when we are strongly objecting. Again, this is not the same thing as opinion of, oh, I don't like it because kids were being abused in this show. It's instead recognizing that the show is even more traumatic because of the way that it is being depicted and primarily because of your own experiences of it. In other words, reader response acknowledges that you are reading the story in a particular way because you have been through certain things. And when you acknowledge that, that's reader response. And that's, I think, a great door to access a lot of texts, or I would say every text, when you are able to acknowledge the ways in which you are making meaning along with the authors and the creators of a particular text.